Here is an overview of the origins and development of the Hasidic movement. This branch of Judaism began in Eastern Europe during the mid-1700s. Very quickly, this new movement developed into a constellation of small religious sects that are collectively known as Hasidism. So why did this movement begin when it did and where it did? To understand this, we have to understand the impact of the Khmelnytsky uprising that occurred in Ukraine and Poland from 1648 to 1657. For Jews of Eastern Europe, the violent attacks perpetrated by Cossack bands led by Bogdan Khmelnytsky overshadowed the other aspects of this political uprising, and Jewish fears of Cossacks and other anti-Semitic mob attacks become a central theme in Jewish life in this part of the world up until World War II.
Cossacks.
During this time, a wave of despair engulfs Eastern European Jews as they witness their communities decline in status from preceding centuries. And here lies the popularity of Hasidism as a response to the suffering of a Jewish community. The early teachings of Hasidism was a blend of earlier Jewish mystical ideas from the Kabbalah with a new emphasis on the spiritual power of every individual. Themes of hope, joy, and the mystical power of Hebrew words in prayer books represented a theology that offered healing to Jews living in towns and villages across Ukraine and Poland and Russia. Another important innovation by Hasidism was in the area of social and spiritual leadership. Hasidic groups were led by charismatic rabbis known as tzaddikim, or saints, who were later known as rebbes. The tzaddik had the independence to teach his own popularized form of Jewish mystical ideas, forging a new Hasidic tradition of a worldview that was rooted in the Kabbalah but also made accessible to lay people through stories, parables, and sermons on the Hebrew Bible. Disciples of the early Hasidic tzaddikim could form their own communities as branches of the movement, and many tzaddikim began dynasties, led by their sons, son-in-laws, or other male relatives after their death. Parenthetically, the topic of women leaders in the Hasidic movement is a topic that should be explored in a separate video with some important but limited examples. To summarize, Hasidism began as a movement to revive the spirit of Jewish communities in Eastern Europe and soon developed into a constellation of distinct religious groups. The demographic strength of Hasidism grew rapidly, becoming a dominant group in Eastern European Jewish life, a trend that lasted until World War II.